What's up, guys? Welcome to this week's episode of The Way, where we're going to be giving you our top 5 safety tips for RVing. So this episode doesn't necessarily just apply to full-time RVers, but really anyone who wants to go RVing.
As we go along this journey, please keep in mind that we are not certified in anything. So we're not an electrician, mechanic, you name it, we're not. So let's just go with that, but this is what we've learned, and we want to set you up for success to not hurt yourself.
We just know enough to know when we don't know something and we need somebody who knows something.
We know enough to be dangerous, with a key emphasis on dangerous. The first thing on our list of safety hazards are your tires. There is a lot of weight weighing down on them, and I know with your car you probably generally just replace them every 40,000 miles or whatever. Everybody has their own metric to gauge that on. But
cut to somebody like me that's like, yeah, sure, I totally change my tires.
Even if you don't. RV tires probably shouldn't be based on the mileage. A lot of people don't drive their RV as much as a car. And, you know, they sit in the sun constantly unless you've got them under cover. So it's really good to, as a rule of thumb, just every 5 years probably swap them out, because you don't want to be driving down the highway at 70 miles an hour and get a blowout, because that is extremely dangerous with 20 to 30,000 pounds of weight behind you.
And that being said, even if they're not being left out in the sun, tires just age like anything else. So yeah, that 5-year marker is kind of like Adam said, it's just a rule of thumb that's basically like your tires are old at this point and you really can't trust them anymore.
For instance, when we bought the RV, we were driving on 7-year-old tires and we didn't really think anything of it because the tread was fine, they looked fine, you know. We drove literally from Arizona all the way to Alabama on them. And you know, luckily nothing happened, but it really was.
We drove all the way back too. We drove all the way back from Alabama to Colorado. We put so many miles on those old tires, and
it wasn't until we got to Alabama when somebody kind of called us out and like, hey, have you thought about doing this? Like, I switch mine pretty much every 4 years, and really that 5 to 6 year mark I think is the sweet spot. But you know, you're not going to hurt yourself by changing them every 4 either.
Yeah, I was gonna say I wouldn't push it past 5.
Regardless, we got lucky. You might not. So if you haven't changed your tires lately, just go pause this video and go do that now.
Alright, so let's talk about propane. A lot of people are already somewhat familiar with propane, you know, if you have a grill at home, or some of you might have a gas burner stove, but it's a little bit different when you're talking about an RV. You know, our furnace runs off of propane, so there's quite a few more appliances that you might have to take into account that might run off of propane or gas to some degree. So having some understanding of how to be safe with those types of appliances is really important if you're going to live or camp in an RV. To start, getting a propane alarm is super important. You're probably already familiar with having a carbon monoxide alarm in your house, but having a propane one is super important in an RV or a motorhome of any kind. With
such a confined space, there's really a whole lot of things that could go wrong with your propane or any number of fumes. But just remember to keep that proper ventilation, especially when you're cooking, when you're running the stove or the oven. You know, you're just getting, even if you don't have a leak, there's exhaust coming out of that you don't want to just be breathing in. So use a ceiling top vent or, you know, your stove top vent, and really just make sure that you're breathing only air, because that's pretty much my advice on a daily basis, is breathe only air. If you take away nothing else, just breathe only air, okay? But, you know, if you do happen to breathe something else, if you smell something funny,
if you happen to breathe something else,
if you smell rotten egg smell or anything of that sort, don't leave it up to chance.
It could just be your husband, but don't leave it up to chance. Make sure that you get a tester for your propane. Oh wait, I have to interject here. Adam actually did set off our propane out. Like, he farted, like, if you don't like this.
I think I had a bean burrito the night before.
No, he like, it was like this huge fart, and then our propane tester and alarm is like in
almost immediately started going off.
And we didn't like associate it, so we started freaking out. We got our portable tester out, which I think that's what Adam was about to say, is get a portable tester and know how to use it. But anyway, we got it out and we're like, we've got to have a leak, we've got to have a leak, and it's not going off for any reason.
I'm the leak.
And then and then like, I don't know which one of us realized, but we were like, wait, you farted like really big right before that. And so we started looking up videos, and yeah, it's apparently a thing. Anyway, don't write off your propane alarm as like, oh, I've just been gassy today. It was a really big fart, okay? Like, it's not normal.
So the third precaution to take when owning and living in an RV is the electricity. You should know some basics of electricity. I had a big crash course when learning about electricity when we were installing the solar, but that may not be the case for you. So it's really helpful to know the basics to troubleshoot if something has gone wrong, when to call a professional. If you don't know anything about electricity, do not do anything, just call a professional immediately.
Or even if you're like Adam and know a little bit, know your line. Still
call a professional, because it's not something to mess around with. I remember when we were getting the transmission work done in Idaho, they were kind enough to wire us a brand new 30 amp outlet so that we could be plugged in while we were getting the transmission work done, but they wired it incorrectly, which produced an open neutral and actually electrified the outside of our RV. If you want to check out our RV hot skin video, click that above. But you know, it shocked Krista. It was no joke. It's no joke for you. So just be prepared and know when to call for help.
Yeah, definitely check out that video. It goes into way more detail about RV hot skin, and you know, not to be like dramatic, I was fine. It wasn't like a big deal, but you know, for elderly people or children or people with heart conditions, or just depending on how electrified something is, it can be really dangerous. So it's really not something to mess around with. And really, outside of getting an electrician when there's a problem, there are some preemptive precautions that you can take, and it really comes down to having the right tools. So having an outlet tester, having a surge protector, and having an NCVT is super important. An outlet tester, you're gonna basically be doing exactly what it sounds like, testing an outlet. It will give you a reading.
It's really more for inside the RV.
And a surge protector, don't plug your RV into anything unless there's a surge protector between it and whatever you're plugging it into. Just don't. Like, that's like, if there's one big takeaway for this part of the video, always have a surge protector. We'll go ahead and link those down in the description. They are devices that you should definitely have if you're gonna live in an RV. Really, if you own a house or live in a house, you should have these things.
These are really just skills that everybody should have.
Yeah, I mean, electricity is dangerous. We kind of take it for granted because we're so used to just having things work all the time. But yeah, it's important to be more aware, especially when you're living in an RV, because you're essentially plugging into all these different pedestals all the time. And that's kind of the whole idea, is you might know what your electrical setup is in your RV, but you might arrive somewhere and you don't know if that outlet has an issue or not. And that's kind of the whole point. Just take preemptive precautions and try to avoid issues on the front end, and if they happen on the back end, get an electrician.
We specifically, for the first like 2 years of having the RV, had this issue where our inverter would actually fault. And I just thought, you know, it was like overheating a little bit, or a fan maybe went out, and I figured out a workaround to where when I unplugged and plugged the RV back on, the inverter would reset and everything would magically work again. But then when I actually had another issue, I got digging around in our breaker box and found a connector that was just completely melted through and looked like it had caused a little small fire in there. And our inverter actually
had it completely melted.
Yeah, our inverter actually had a ground short in it, which, if you don't know what that means, I'll quote our electrician specifically, and he said, it's a burn down your house kind of problem. And you don't want those kind of problems because, you know, it's hard to get out in a fire and with dogs, and just get it taken care of.
Point being is we found like a little workaround for what we just perceived as like a minor annoyance, but it was actually something like completely dangerous that we ignored for way too long. Point being, always go with a professional, and also keep in mind that you might need to get an RV specific electrician, somebody that really understands inverters and how RVs are set up. Is super helpful. Speaking with different electricians on the phone when we were hiring somebody, when we found that melted wire, there was definitely electricians that didn't want to touch the project because they didn't really have a whole lot of knowledge on an RV specifically. And even just like talking the issue through with the various electricians that we spoke with, that worked specifically on RVs seemed a lot more knowledgeable, and to have like suggestions of what the issue might be like right off the top of their head. So anyway, there's usually a right person for the job, so find that person, and it's probably not you.
All right, number 4 on our list of safety precautions is driving. You know, you may be used to driving, you may even have a driver's license, but you may not have driven something that is 45 feet long when you're heading 75 miles an hour down the road. So if this is your first time taking it for a test run, maybe do it on a route that you're comfortable in. You know, you don't want to be going up a mountain pass when you've never done it before and you've never done it in a 45-foot long vehicle before. So really just make sure that you are set up for success. You know, do some maneuvers in a parking lot. Get a gauge for that turning radius.
I'm just like picturing somebody like doing like donuts with an RV in a parking lot.
Well, don't do donuts. That's not recommended. You'll probably just tip the RV almost immediately. And you know, another thing to keep into account, the first time I drove the RV was a 2-hour trip from Denver to Pueblo. And you know, I was just tense.
You're gonna get sore
the whole time. And by the time I got there, I had a major back tension issue that didn't go away for months.
Point being, it's like a workout. Work yourself up.
So, I mean, you'll get comfortable, I'd say probably after your first like 1,000 or so miles. But
I thought you were gonna say 1,000 or so drives. I was like, so never.
So never. I'm still,
you will never be comfortable. Well, to some extent, that's actually kind of true. Like, there's no, it's not that, like, I don't know, when you drive a regular car, I feel like now I'm kind of just like, whatever. Well, okay.
You don't have the best driving record.
No, I just mean like, I'm not stressed.
Don't follow her lead.
I'm not stressed, but I feel like to some extent, like obviously I'm still stressed driving the RV because I haven't done as many miles as him. But I would say to some degree, even you're still like more stressed when driving.
Absolutely. I still, you know, every time I drive this thing, I try to approach it as the 30,000-pound, 45-foot beast that it is. Even though I'm more comfortable with it now, with almost 30,000 miles under my belt, I still try to approach it with a clear head and, you know, avoiding distractions and inclement conditions can really set you up for success. We still, if at all possible, do not drive in inclement weather. Obviously, you can't avoid that in some situations, but you know.
Well, we've pulled off the road. Like, we've been in situations where, you know, like, you can't avoid it, and we still were like, well, we gotta pull off the road. You have to kind of know when enough is enough, and like, that there's a certain degree of like, even if you're the best, you know, big rig driver around, there's certain conditions that you shouldn't be driving in. I don't care how good you are.
And at the end of the day, driving or not, if you're getting in a hurry like that, I can promise you that all of your problems, or at least 99% of them, will happen when you're getting in a hurry, that are self-inflicted, you know.
Every issue we've ever had with driving the RV is when we were rushing and we shouldn't have been.
Moral of the story is that when you're driving something that is dangerous, every time you get behind the wheel, just respect it the way that you should.
It's a responsibility. That being said, other drivers on the road don't really care. You are going to encounter so many more people cutting you off, so many more people just driving erratically, trying to not be near you, that make it just that much more stressful. Even if the weather's good, even if there's not much traffic, you'll get people just doing weird, crazy, stupid things because they don't want to be behind you, they don't want to be near you, whatever it is. You know, and I get it to a degree, but it's not like an excuse to be reckless. But unfortunately, that's just kind of the truth. When Adam was first learning how to drive the RV, I actually, like, we didn't have our flat tow system set up. So generally, if we were taking it somewhere, or if we were taking it somewhere to drop it off, you know, I have to drive separately anyway. And if he was like merging onto the highway, I would like specifically not let people cut him off. And I'm not necessarily recommending that you do that, because that could be dangerous in its own way. But, you know, point being is when he was learning, I was like even more protective of that, because it's it's already hard enough. You're already learning a lot of stuff. Adam got to learn how to drive the RV before we were flat towing, and I was like a little bit jealous of that because basically when I started learning, we were already like set up on the road.
If you want to check out her first time driving, we'll link it down in the description.
Yeah, and even I've gotten way more comfortable driving the RV than I was at the start. I definitely don't have as many miles as Adam, but I've got a lot more than a lot of people. And, you know, I feel confident to say that I could switch him out, and we have this like running like joke that for whatever reason every time it's my turn to drive the RV, we always hit construction or like whatever is like the least desirable.
I just don't complain about it when it happens.
No, there has like been multiple times that like, and I think this is why. It's like he'll be driving and we'll be on like an open highway with big shoulders and I'll be like sitting there like, I could do this. And then I'll be like, yeah, next stop, let's switch. And then we switch. And then we like hit, yeah, and then there's like no shoulder, and then I'm like, oh.
Moral of the story is the only way to learn any skill, especially driving an RV, is to just do it. Just do it like the great Nike god said.
Okay.
But, you know, having a co-pilot.
But do it with these tips we gave you.
Having a co-pilot doesn't hurt either, you know. Having Krista handle the navigation and just get me my water if I need it, and, you know, just making it as focused of an experience as possible. Co-pilot aside, you know, also co-pilot from an app perspective.
Yes.
That is aware of all of the places that your RV cannot go is super helpful. We actually use the app RV Co-pilot, link in the description, but it has our exact dimensions and will only navigate us to places that we can actually fit. And I promise,
it'll give you the best route for your rig. Like, it won't recommend necessarily the quickest way. It will recommend
the safest way.
Yes.
Keyword of the day. Anyway, every time that we've gone against RV Co-pilot, we have regretted it dearly.
Do not disobey Co-pilot. There are bridges and like low wires on certain roads that you literally can't take your RV through. Like, you will hit your roof. So that's a big reason that you need to get an app of something of that kind, because you don't want to be in a situation where you're like driving down a road and you're like, I don't know if I can fit under that bridge or not. I still, like, even with Co-pilot, like, Adam hates it every time we go under a bridge.
Is that bridge too short? It's gonna hit our roof?
When they're not labeled,
like
it stresses,
16
because
feet
there's
high.
so many bridges that aren't labeled, and it like, when I see the little number, like, they're like, oh, it's 15 feet, I'm like, okay, I like, even though it looks short, I know it's supposedly okay. But you'll come across bridges that don't say it, and they look short, and it stresses me out every time. But Co-pilot is my friend, and makes me feel safer. All right, so our number 5 safety tip, or thing that you should be aware of, is storms, the weather. It sounds obviously like something you might take for granted or not really think about, or, you know, think it's not
especially
really,
if you're coming from a sticks and bricks house.
Yeah, you might not think it's as big of a deal, but it definitely is. I mean, it's a big deal for having a house anyway sometimes, but definitely having an RV, you have to be a little bit more aware, just in the sense that you're going to be in a lot of locations that you need to, just kind of know what the weather is like for the time of year that you're going. So pretty much like, when we book a location, if we're going somewhere, well, generally, most of the time, even just for like freezing temperatures and stuff, but also for like other types of weather, just look up like, what is the weather like in Montana in said month, like whatever, and like, just do that. Get in the habit of doing that. Try to know what to expect when you're going somewhere, not just for, you know, enjoyment reasons, but also for safety reasons. We were just in Tennessee, like right on the border of Kentucky, when all those big tornadoes recently came through, and we were not paying attention to our weather apps. We were not staying on top of things. We
were blissfully in the McDonald's drive-thru at the time.
And Adam's mom called us, and then luckily we have our very good friends in Tennessee, Bethany. Shout out to you if you're watching. But basically, she called us as well and was like, I think you guys should come over tonight, and I'm glad we did. You know, we ended up getting lucky, nothing happened, but we did spend like 2 solid hours in her closet with her, and Gideon, her 4-year-old, and her 2 dogs, and Blue and Delilah also had to hunker down in a bathroom in their house and just basically be safe during a tornado warning. Basically, just research the location before you go there, Google what the weather's supposed to be like before you get there, have an app that updates you what the weather is going to be like as you're there. That's something we actually got given our recent tornado escapades, and we'll link that down in the description below. Basically, we just got this app that like updates Adam's phone. I don't even know
15 to 30 minutes ahead of time.
It'll like tell us when it's gonna rain, it'll tell us if there's a thunderstorm warning or tornado warning or whatever it is. It will update us, and point being, you might forget to check your app or stay on top of the weather, so have something that will nudge you basically and be like, hey, maybe you should know about this. It's definitely important. And also, being in an RV, always know where the nearest like storm shelter or tornado shelter is. Like, you don't want to be in a situation where like you find out that like something
because
dangerous,
it's knocking at your door.
You don't want to be like scrambling to figure that out at the last second. We were very fortunate, like in our situation, that our friends and family looked out for us, and they like we had somewhere to go without even like thinking about it. But yeah, definitely something to add to our new list of things that we've learned since being on the road is that we should probably be a little more proactive about like when we arrive somewhere, like, okay, if there's like a tornado, if there's a hurricane, if there's some crazy storm or situation, where's the nearest place we should go? And have that in your head and know where that is. And, you know, hopefully you never have to use it, but know it when you're calm, not when you're freaking out.
Yeah, you know, if you have kids or, you know, just family in general, having an emergency action plan for any situation is a good practice for surviving.
All right, guys, so that kind of took like a really serious note at the end. But
we appreciate you sticking around.
No, but I think that's, you know, how it should be. These, you know, we've joked around quite a bit through this video, but at the end of the day, we really wanted to make this because these are things that, you know, could potentially be very hazardous to really anyone, but especially people living in RVs. So, you know, if there's something we forgot, definitely comment it down below.
Hopefully this list has been helpful to you. It hasn't really been helpful for us because we had to learn them all the hard way. Hopefully you don't have to learn them the hard way by watching this video. But we appreciate you.
I don't think we had to learn them all the hard way. We just like...
We got really lucky on a lot of them. I will definitely give you that. But we appreciate you sticking through to the end of this video. And as always, guys,
thanks for traveling with us.
See you next week.